Plus. Time for that pep talk.
All right, and welcome back to the Be Positive Music Show right here on SiriusXM channel 154 and Holy Culture Radio. It's your host again, B Plus, and let's talk about the first half of today's show. Starting off with the first quarter. Now, the first quarter, I decided to show some love to some of the indie ladies within Christian hip hop. And the first song you heard was by Kid Lee. The name of the song was No More Cloudy Days. And then I followed that up with a song called Paradise, and that was by Toya Love. So make sure you go out and check out the music by Kid Lee and also Toya Love wherever you go to stream or buy your music. Make sure you go do that. That was the first quarter of today's show. Now, the second quarter of today's show, I debuted my album review. I like to call it my recap countdown of Lecrae's brand new project entitled Church Clothes 4. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I had a great time just kind of sitting down and digesting this project. There's some albums that you really need to just listen to from end to end and make sure that you take the time just to kind of critically think through and just hear the hearts of these artists. So that's what I did there with the recap countdown of Lecrae's Church Clothes 4. And now it is time for today's halftime pep talk. Now, obviously, this is the Be Positive Music Show, but one thing that I do want to start talking about a little bit more is I'm not just being positive at the expense of avoiding tough talks. But one thing I'm not going to do, I'm not going to hop on here and I'm not going to critique, and I'm not going, well, I may critique, but I'm not going to criticize artists for their views and points of views for that matter. But what I do want to do with today's pep talk is talk about deconstruction. And one thing that's interesting to me is a lot of times Christians act really funny when you bring that word up, and it feel like they just don't want to have a tough conversation. But I want to talk about that here today. And I actually did a whole series on deconstruction on my YouTube channel about a year ago. And one thing that I always do when I talk about deconstruction, I always talk about renovation, because I look at this more of a faith renovation more so than, well, I was saying renovation because people didn't like to hear the word deconstruction. So if you care to check that out, go over to YouTube, you can find that there. But what I want to talk about is that deconstruction is simply when your faith gets challenged and you are forced to examine it. And I think that there's examples in the Bible where that was done. I talked about it last week on the show. I talked about John the Baptist. When he was found himself in prison, he actually gathered his disciples and said, hey, go find Jesus and figure out if he really is who he said he was, even though he was there when he baptized him, even though his whole mission in life was to prepare the way for Christ. He came to a point to where he had to really examine his faith. And I also feel like Jesus himself was deconstructing the Pharisees and Sadducees all the time. I mean, a lot of people at that time, a lot of people who were believers, who were just believers in God, they felt, or believers in God of the Bible, let me be specific there, they thought that he was going to come like a conquering king coming from David's bloodline. And they thought he was just going to look a certain way when he came, and he had to kind of deconstruct that and say that, no, this is an upside down kingdom. So even Christ just kind of deconstructed their thoughts and minds. So simply put, this is how I see this whole idea of deconstruction. I look at it this way. I think that a lot of us are handed a God in an envelope. Just kind of go with this analogy. I know it's over radio. You probably can't see my hand motions and things like that, but you're handed God in an envelope, and that envelope can be a denomination, it could be cultural, it could be political, it could be racial, it could be philosophical, it can be a lot of different things that God is handed you in this particular envelope. But at some point, that envelope is going to be challenged, and that challenging of what you have God inside of is deconstruction, and I feel like it needs to happen. I say need because I feel like no matter how well you think your envelope is constructed, no matter how well you think your theology fits together in your head, there's going to come times where it's challenged, and I don't think it's a bad thing for it to be challenged, but we have to make sure that we're walking through this idea of deconstruction with having good thought leaders around you, like Lecrae mentioned in his song, like a Tony Evans and people like that. So with that being said, I do want to go ahead and play the song Deconstruction by Lecrae. I hope you guys enjoy it. This is the Be Positive Music Show. I'm your host, B+, and we will be right back after this.
I deconstructed long before people knew what to call it.